All my friends moved to the city, and maybe they're like me, trying to build something of their own. I just never figured out how to start. Hey Replit, build me a site where people can see my work and make bookings. Turns out the first step didn't have to happen at a desk. It could happen the second an idea hit. Make the colors of the site warm, soft, and a little faded. Add a font like that, a serif with some weight. This is looking really good, but I needed to do a little more. Add a way for clients to book real dates and make payments. And when it was ready, I could make it live. Create your future right from your phone. What will you build today? Download the Replit mobile app.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Replit Live today. Replit Live Deep Dive. Ooh, that's got a nice little ring to it. We are going to go and explore the idea of what makes a product good today. So, let's see. We got a lot to talk about. What's up, Manny? How you doing?
How's it going? I am pumped about today. I got my notepad, I got my sticky notes. I'm gonna be here like jotting a bunch of notes, man, because I'm super excited for you to be covering design thinking and design. As you know, I'm a big fan of your design, what you build, how you build it. I'm always surprised. Like you build a new prototype and I see it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so intuitive. Like, how do you do this, man? So I'm loving that you're gonna spend two hours on this, and I'm sure everybody in the chat is gonna be super excited about this as well.
Yeah, I don't know how long we will actually go today. Depends on how you all get excited about this. We are going to cover a lot of design principles and a lot of design theory. We're not going to be in Replit a ton today. We're just going to be thinking about what is good design. You know, a lot of people talk about design being subjective. There are pieces of design that are subjective and artistic and kind of are up to the whim of the interpretation and the artist who creates it and the blah, blah, whatever. But what we're going to learn is that there are skeletons and structure and ideas that kind of guide us to good design. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the theory of design, how to put that into practice, and just kind of explore. Again, we're going to go back to art school. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Before we go all the way through, let's clear this from the screen just for a sec so we got the full view. And let's just kind of share what's coming up. So today, obviously, we're talking about the basics of good design, design thinking, what all kind of that entails. Tomorrow, we've got a special launch event. If you looked at our Luma event calendar, we've got a fun, there's a product launch happening tomorrow. There's an X Spaces happening at 2 p.m. We tested an X Space last week. And we're also going to do something in Discord. If you've not been part of our office hours, we're really trying to kind of build some excitement and momentum around the Discord office hours. And so we're going to get hands-on with, some things tomorrow. So anyway, join us tomorrow. If you're not, you can go to community.com/Replit, and there is a Discord link there. Go ahead and click that. You'll log in with Replit, and you'll be in the game with us. And then Friday, Manny, we've got a showcase, and unfortunately, you're not going to be around, right? The breaking the womp womp.
Yeah, I'm going to be out. I'm going to be traveling to New York. So if you have any suggestions, chat, of what I should be checking out in New York when I'm out there with the fam. I know. The wife has the opposite sound effect. She's like, yay, finally a vacation.
Yeah.
I'm going to be bummed to miss it, though. As Reimer mentioned, we've got a big launch happening tomorrow, and that showcase is going to be all about that launch. You're going to see some cool demos, some cool people. Reimer and Francisco are going to be hosting, and also we may have some of you on as well. So be on the lookout for that. If you haven't joined our Discord, make sure you do that. I dropped the link to that in the chat. And then also check out our ambassador Slack channel. If you're an ambassador, head over to that Slack community and look for details there. You might have already gotten a preview, a little heads up. And this is another plug for the ambassador program. The ambassadors already know what's up. So if you're an ambassador, make sure you keep it zip. But that's another cool reason to join the ambassador program. And yes, definitely join us tomorrow in Discord. We've got some really fun things lined up for you. It's going to be some cool perks that you're going to want to join us for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, being an ambassador, getting closer inside the loop is going to be super cool. And then obviously joining us in the Discord, it's kind of a way to get into that inner circle and kind of hang with us. These streams are mostly broadcast one way. Obviously, we try to pay attention to the chat and bring in the comments. Let's take a look and see what's up. I see first name is Nadia. Chris makes sense. What's up? Alva, hello. What's up, everyone out there? Noni, Epic. I see everyone. Brett. Mahmood on LinkedIn. Hello, LinkedIn. What's up? Loving this. Yeah. Hi, Angela. Ruth in the chat, of course. Manuel Marcus. What's up, everyone? Kizzer's in the house. KG Artworks, of course, helping us in Discord and moderating. Shout out to all the folks who are with us weekly and sometimes multiple times per week. We always appreciate you. So, okay. So let's get into the gist. We've got a lot to cover today. Folks maybe do not know this about me, but I am a design school dropout. A lot of my background is in design. I don't practice design a ton anymore. However, as Manny said, I do fill in gaps here and there, and I bring that design into a lot of things that I do. I then cut my teeth kind of door-to-door corporate sales. That's a long story. We won't get into any of that. But I kind of hacked my way into the world of tech as a function of that, leveraging design, media, content, et cetera. And I've kind of been helping companies scale digital products for the last 15 years, 10 of those building like user groups, community-based things. Again, product-driven design things around like communities of I guess digital products is the best way to say it, right? So whether that's little WordPress widgets, whether that's Webflow widgets, whether that's stuff in the no-code space, obviously now here at Replit, doing a lot of different things that involve design and tinkering and thinking about that stuff. And so I am going to take you through a little bit about what makes a digital product good. Okay. Okay. So core thing to think about is not making the user think about what you want to actually have happen here. Okay. If you haven't read a book, there's a great book by a guy named Steve Krug that is literally titled Don't Make Me Think. If you're thinking about or want to get into better design, better product design, things like that, you may want to check out that book. It's kind of an older book. It doesn't talk a lot about like modern design concepts, but the stuff that it covers and the things that it covers are really important. It was one of the first books I read when I got into thinking about product design, and I recommend it to everyone still that kind of gets into building, making, designing, working with digital products, because it talks a lot about, again, the flow, how to kind of make things sequential for the user. I'm going to try to dissect some of that, but it's a book I recommend. Manny, I know you're always recommending books, so I'm trying to follow in your footsteps here.
I like it, dude. I'm gonna get it.
Go and get it. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the idea of design thinking. Maybe you've heard this. I wonder if I want to like present, but it's giving me that little. There it goes. Okay, all right. Got rid of the little box at the top. All right, what is design thinking? So a lot of people talk about design thinking. They include the step of like empathize in at the top with define. So however you want. There's some people call it 4 steps, some people call it 5 steps. Either way, the core thing is to think about what is the problem you're going to solve, right? A lot of people, especially in this world where you can just get into building software, and they start building things. And they don't really think about this first phase, right? They jump right into the prototype phase or the ideate phase, and they don't really stop to think about it. And we talk about this all the time. This is why plan mode is really good inside of Replit. This is why it's good to kind of think through, and we call it yap mode, is to go through and kind of yap about what you want to build. That allows you to define what the problem is very clearly. And then the things you start building should iterate on that specific solution, right? And so when you think about design, you shouldn't just be thinking about how does this thing look? You should be thinking about what do I want the user to do? What is my intended action? And what are the things I need to put in front of the user to get to that? And that should kind of be your guiding vision, right? The colors, the typography, the other stuff, we're going to get into that. But that stuff often comes secondary, right? Like you often want to think about this thing, at least from a tech standpoint and a requirement standpoint for your agent prompt before you go into this thing. But what I really want to get you to think about here is that there is a whole school of thought around this process of basically taking something that you define, a problem, the ideation phase, which is exploring, sketching, coming up with like what you think are proposed solutions, and then obviously prototyping those things and then testing them out. This becomes that loop, right? And so there's a whole school of thought about this that you might hear people thinking. All you have to know about this whole process is that this is your iteration cycle, and this is what you want to get through as fast as possible. This is why, again, a tool like Replit helps you move so fast, because you can move through these prototype phases, through these testing phases, and then you can push into production. You can actually like build and deploy the functional thing that you want. And this accelerating loop is kind of what the whole AI movement is pushing forward, right? So the best thing you can do is, again, think through the earlier phases before you get into building and testing, but also making sure that the things you test are very targeted, very specific, and then as you take them out, you get real user feedback on this stuff, right?
We had Vic and Zaid on the show on Friday talking about the mobile redesign. They're from the design team here at Replit, and they kept iterating this concept of a critical path, or like Zaid always coming back to this critical path that he wanted his users to follow, and they were just iterating on that cycle and that path, and always keeping that front and center. I think that's what you're referring to, similar to that, Reimar, like this critical path that you want users to go down or through in your app.
Yeah. And not just the critical flow, but just the general, like, okay, there can be multiple critical flows depending on the part or the stage of the design of the product, right? So like step one is getting people into the app, right? And then from there, you might want them to do something inside the app, or you might want them to complete a sequence of things inside the app, or you might want them to come back day after day and complete the sequence of apps. Each of those things, especially as nuanced as you can get them, should get their own little loop, right? And so that onboarding flow should have its own little loop. Like the actual functionality should have its own little loop, right? In every piece of that, you can break it down into like small chunks. And again, this is where remix a project, create a fork, create a parallel task, test it in development. There's lots of ways to kind of test these things quickly and get feedback in a way that hadn't before been possible here. And so, I think that, like, again, that's going back to how fast the whole ecosystem is moving here. This is the type of thing that you can accelerate with a tool like Replit and working through these design cycles much faster. Okay. Hey, Manny, I know some of the comments aren't coming in through the live chat. If we can just fall back to restream here. Sorry, I figured that was easier than trying to type.
Sounds good. Will do.
Okay, so and maybe we can just hold off on those until we get through the design school here. Okay, so design is problem solving, not just decoration. This is a fun meme. Maybe you've seen this meme if you're in the UI UX space. From top to right, from left to right, top to bottom, you see a sidewalk, and then you see people cut in the corner. Then they put a park bench because it's messing up the grass, and then people go around the park bench, and so they put a trash can, and then people go on the other side of the park bench. And so, like, a lot of times we try to design. A lot of times we think about, like, we want people to do things a certain way. There's lots of other memes that I wish I could have found. There's another one where, like, this lady's trying to, like, put blocks, and she's watching somebody put blocks into the UI, and it's like a little child's toy, and she just...
Oh, right.
And then just the person starts putting... Maybe you can find that in the background. I don't know. We'll come back to it. But, a lot of people, like, you have an idea of what you want people to do in your product, but what they're going to do is probably what you need to start thinking about. And again, that goes back to that iteration cycle. And so you want to think about, hey, I have this intended behavior, I have this intended path for the user, but they keep trying to do this, right? So maybe your product should go do that, or lean towards that direction, or find out how to do that. And so just like that last example, people kept cutting through here, an LSU quad set up wonky, and you can kind of see they just did follow the path. They're like, hey, people are walking from these corridors, they're kind of cutting in between walkways. Like, why not just follow that? And so this is how you should think about your product design, right? And so I'm going to take you over the next 30-ish minutes. We're going to run through all of these principles of design, the concepts that, again, we talked about, will help you think this through. It's not necessarily going to fix your design skills. It's not something that's going to make you a better designer by default. It's going to give you the language to start understanding this, or to start thinking about design, or to start asking the agent for the types of designs you want. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how to apply this stuff, and then we can take it from there. Okay, so a little bit about the psychology of design. There is a concept called Gestalt principles, right? And this is I'm going to introduce you to a lot of rules, a lot of laws, a lot of concepts that have like hard definitions. You don't need to worry about any of those names. I don't know any of these names except for, like in passing. What I know are the rules and the concepts that I'm going to try to explain. And these should not be very new to you, but I just want you to understand why and where they come from. Okay, so the concept, let's go through each of these. The idea of proximity, right? The idea that as you group things in your design, it makes the page feel cohesive. So if you have things scattered across your page, if you have too much stuff across the page, if you don't have things clearly bundled together on the page, you can create a lot of friction for the user. You can create a lot of cognitive load. And as we're going to talk about later, the more cognitive load you put on your page, the harder it is to get to the outcome you want because the user has to think about more things. Remember, we opened this up talking about don't make me think. There should not be a lot of thought going into what you want the user to do on every specific page. Now, that may change based on the type of page you have, right? So let's say we have a pricing page. You can have proximity, but you can also have similarity, right? And so you have these cards that are bundled together. So it says, hey, this is where the pricing goes. But also I'm going to throw some emphasis on top of this. And now visually, I am guiding you. You saw this years ago as a trend, and now almost every pricing page follows this. And we'll talk a little bit about why we bring those preconceived notions in and why you should kind of deviate from these core principles, core patterns, core concepts at your own will. You can design these, you can add your own color, you can do your own thing, you can even get creative with your design. But again, people have specific expectations about what they're going to run into. And you then, again, based on proximity, based on how similar these elements are, you can bring them together, right? Closure is another way that we kind of think about and box things, right? So again, these cards have proximity. You see that things are cut off, but you understand that this pattern continues, right? And so as you build things that slide off screen, if I just had 3 cards here, you may not know that they swipe, right? Maybe you have a swipe indicator, but you're making me think, does this swipe, does this not swipe? Whereas if you design with this in mind and you have this cut off card or you have these visual cues, the user can kind of just follow the pattern. And what the user ends up doing is spending their time reading your content, exploring and feeling and connecting with your brand rather than thinking about where do I go next? How do I get to what I'm trying to do? And so your job as a designer, your job as you're thinking about design is to remove all of that complexity from the user so that when they enter your product, the only logical path is to give you money or to take the next step or to convert on your call to action, right? Continuity is another piece of this where like, how do you flow someone from top to bottom, from left to right? Where do you want them to navigate on your page, right? How do you turn this entire experience of interacting with your digital product into something that feels like a seamless path from front to back, right? That's what they call continuity. You can even like you've even seen this maybe in some modern design where you'll scroll and they'll have some fancy line that like literally grabs your eye and you're just watching this thing down the page. Like I'm not sure whether those scroll jacking sites are like good design. They're for sure eye catching. Measuring good design is about kind of measuring the outcome. So you always want to have some kind of analytics or tool to measure what you're actually doing here. But you can get as clear as I'm sure people are watching this on screen. You see the dotted line, it draws your eye, it becomes a thing you can do. Again, your job is to bring me in through the story and create maybe a little bit of separation, right? So this figure ground, we see this with modals, we see this with pop-ups, we see this with all sorts of elements on the web. What you're trying to do is kind of separate, the experience, right? So as you create a modal, as you create a focus point, as you create something you want the user to interact with, you can ask for this type of separation. You can kind of create this little bit of differentiation between the foreground, between the background, and then again, a focused call to action brings everything right into the pane. Okay, another great way to kind of link and think through pulling your elements together is obviously how they're grouped. We talked about that. But beyond grouping, what happens if I make a selection? What happens if I interact with an element, right? You can show me that they're all going to do the same thing without putting a bunch of text on the screen, or without making it very obvious with like popovers or tooltips. One of the things we get a lot are like the little alert banners in the bottom of the screen. Like, you don't always need those, right? Can you, as I select, give me a border, give me a little inset, give me a little taste of, hey, these are all now, I mean, a checkbox is the simplest version of this, right? You can always just ask for the checkbox. But what else can you do to group these things? What else can you do to visually indicate to somebody that if I take an action here, it's not just going to affect one element, it's going to affect multiple pieces of these elements. Symmetry and order, this one's fairly straightforward from the Gestalt concepts. It's basically balance, right? Like, it feels good, right? If I have, and you can go brutalist on this, right? Maybe on the right side, this could all be one big image, right? It's okay. You still find balance between the chunks of the page to guide the user's eye, to guide them to what the next step is, and to really lead them into understanding, like, what is it you're trying to translate, right? This could be any news article on the web. There's a reason why headlines and titles kind of fall into the concepts and the ways that they do, right? And this obviously is natural hierarchy. So if your page has two big headlines, well, now people have to compete and think about, like, which of these are you actually trying to get me to read, right? And so again, thinking about the typography, thinking about the hierarchy, thinking about, how this stuff is structured on your page. The agent does most of this. Where you get to win is thinking about the taste, right? Like, thinking about, hey, the agent sometimes added this extra eyebrow. The AI maybe duplicated an element. Maybe it aligned one thing to the left and one thing to the right, or something centered and something's to the left. This is where you, as the tastemaker or as the overseer of this thing, become the one that gets to, like, again, decide whether it's good or not. The agent is going to grab, best practices. It's going to grab great quality design. It's going to grab its training data. It's going to have different models are going to kind of give you different outputs. But your job, as you're thinking about design, as you're thinking about all of these different concepts, it's your job to kind of think about, how do I tie these all together so that not just this one card that the agent created for this task looks good, but that it fits into this global hierarchy of the story I'm trying to tell, right? In these UI elements, I'm kind of showing you like a small example, a small chunk, a little piece. But what a designer is really good at is putting that all together into one cohesive unit. And so if you think about your application, it's not like small chunks, but we do work on it on small chunks. And so sometimes your application will feel disconnected simply because you start working it here, and then you start adding features here, and you add more features here, and you don't actually think about, hey, I need a similar design language throughout this, right? And so we'll talk about at the end how you can ask the agent to create a skill, how you can document some of this stuff and have it referenced in future projects, and kind of how you can make this a little more natural in your flow. Because this is something that you don't want to, like, while I said a lot of the visual design, like at the beginning, can come towards the end, the more you think about design, the more you think about the end state, the more you like put into this before you start building or while you're building, the easier it is, right? And so you can tweak things, you can start tightening things up. I often spend, I would say, probably 10% of my agent cycles just tightening up the UI. 10 to 15%, almost always, right? There's like this 80-20 distribution rule, this idea that like the agent's probably going to get you 80-85% of what you want from a like high quality design standpoint. And then where you're going to do the thing where people are like, app or not, is really going to be you going in and cleaning these things up, optimizing for performance, right here. So color, size, contrast, motion, register in under 250 milliseconds. So before you even get a chance to read, before people even think about like, what am I doing on this page, they're going to get that snapshot of like, is this a place I want to be? Do I need to invest more of my cognitive time to think about what's going on this page? This is the don't make me think principle. The faster you can get someone to just see your thing and then get sucked into that, that's it. That's how you win. And good design is about pulling them through that story again. Now, this doesn't mean you have to have some overly designed, scrolly telling, crazy landing page. We're going to look at some of those at the end when we talk about inspiration and where to go to get inspiration for design. What it means is that you have a clear story that addresses the need of the audience who's visiting your page, right? And so that may be a splashy, beautiful, like landing page type thing. That could also be a very clear text-driven landing page that converts really highly. If you look at a lot of the vitamins and things that even like every company kind of does this when they're in startup phase, they want this beautiful splashy landing page, and then when they go enterprise mode, they like pare it down, simplify it, clean it up, tighten it up, and then they go persona for corporate things. So like again, it depends on where you are, what you're doing. Design is not like this carte blanche thing that you just like splatter on everything, right? It's one of those things you have to think through at every process. That's why we started with the idea of design thinking, because just like you have to get into the development cycle where you're iterating on your product, you have to start thinking about the design and the flow of that product. And again, the speed matters. A well-designed page makes it so much easier to like drive conversions, especially because we're in the era where anyone can build and anyone can design. And so I have less trust now when I go to a product, right? If I go to your product and it doesn't really like build trust immediately, if it feels like something that's more of a wireframe, we talked about this in the build-a-thons when we were reviewing the sites, Manny, if you remember. Like one of our biggest critiques of people was like, hey, this feels like a wireframe. This isn't a design just yet. You have the bones here, but you need to kind of add the design. And so those are the things, we'll talk a little bit about using design to focus attention now, that really help you get, again, into the cake. So Manny, maybe we take a second to stop there.
Yeah, and a quick question is we're looking through some of the comments. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like what you're doing before that initial build and after. So which one of these principles are you really like honed in on as you're sketching things out? And then as you go into plan mode, in that plan mode session, are you dropping in sketches of what you drew out or wireframes? Like what's like that initial build up before that first build?
Yeah. Let me see. We do it live. I might dox myself, y'all. Let's go to this actually for a second.
Like what's the Rymar checklist before you even like go into build mode and Replit? I guess I'm curious about.
Yeah, so this is where I'm talking about where like I don't call any of these concepts out by name, right? So I'm not over here saying like, I want to use Gestalt principles to lay out my, I want to use proximity to, what I'll say is I want a set of cards that describe X. Or I might come into the canvas and draw some shapes and give it a really simple skeleton of how those things might be laid out. I think I'm logged into the wrong browser here.
And that's what designers would call wireframe, right? Like the basic kind of like just this basic sketch of the basic cards and the flow, high level skeleton, as you mentioned.
Correct. And I have I think I'm trying to find some good examples of this stuff because I do this a lot. Okay, so this is when I prompt to the agent, let's go back to screen share. When I prompt the agent, this is oftentimes things that I'll do is just kind of like, look, even what the fuck is this baby? Like so like I kind of call it out. I take screenshots. I like give it additional context here. So and I used to do this a lot more outside of the agent canvas, which is why I'm pulling this out here. But I do this more now inside of Replit, right? So before I used to do some of this stuff, so you can see as I work, I kind of, will add context. And I think I shared examples of this before where I create little UI cards like this. So like, let's say I was, thinking about a card section, I might just grab and, give it this thing. And then I might come over here and hang on, let me make these actual elements I can click. Hello, let me give it a background. So, and again, you can do this in Replit. I'm just going to show real quick here, but I might give it something like this, and I might do a little bit like this if that's what I want. And maybe I want some text. So this is the, and so I will often think about things like this, especially if I want to create something that that might be a little unique, or whatever. So I will think through things like this and give the agent a little bit of idea back of the napkin. I also start by hand a lot. Surprisingly, I still start quite a bit by hand sketching concepts. I don't have my notebook with me, but at my actual work desk, I very often like will doodle, sketch, think through. Because if we go back again, let's go all the way back to this here, this define and ideate phase. The ideation phase is not explore a single idea, right? Ideate is explore all the ideas. When you talk to a designer, when you talk to a good designer, if you ever watch like a time lapse of a designer's screen, you will see the project go through so many iterations, right? And it's one of those things like if you're a designer and you get to the end state and you get to the meeting with the client and the client's like, oh, well, did you try? Yes, we tried. Well, did you try? Yes, we tried. What about if you put, no, we tried, right? This is what works for you. Right. And again, part of design is defending your ideas and defending the reason why you made this decision and being able to take these things up chain. You don't have to defend it to the user often, but you have to defend it to yourself. You have to defend it to the CFO. You have to defend it to, like the marketing team. You have to defend it to like, does this thing actually hit the goal of what I'm trying to think about? And so again, when you're ideating through these products, when you're thinking through these things, when you're sketching things out, this is where it goes really good, where you can ask the agent, hey, show me a few options of this on the canvas, right? Like give me ideas for where we can go. Think about how we can think, think about how we can like evolve this process. If you watch, what stream was it where we did all the fun, we built the CRM and we applied the really crazy brutalist design, I think it was a few weeks ago, where you can kind of see us walk through the entire design process of taking something that's a simple shell, a wireframe like this, right? Because a lot of you guys get sites that look like this, right? If I'm reviewing, lots of stuff, this is very easy, like to get to this. What makes the difference between this versus something that converts is what makes you the good designer. It's what kind of ties this stuff together. So I think that kind of answered your question, but also went lots of different places.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me, it's like using those tools that Canvas tool that you have. I think there's also like Excel Draw that I've used before, but then also just sketching things and getting kind of like just a feel for like the big steps of that critical path that you're going to be thinking about.
Yeah, wherever you go to tinker with that stuff, like Figma's great. We showed you the other day how to pull in designs from the Figma MCP and get like exactly what you want inside of Replit. I know there's lots of places, Excalidraw, TL Draw. Some people still use SketchUp. Like there's lots of places people still go to kind of do that stuff. It's just good to think through it, right? And you don't need to be a good quote unquote designer anymore to like get good designs out of this stuff. What you need to know, again, the same thing with prompting, is how to like ask for what you want, how to define. So somebody asked, can you define brutalism? Where is that? Can you define brutalism? We can pull, sorry, folks, it looks like our new lower thirds are giving us a little, that's what I get for testing and trying to publish something right for the stream. Can you define brutalism? Yeah, brutalism is like this very raw, abstract, like things on top of each other, maybe harsh color changes,
hard edges,
big images in your face, like chunky text. We can maybe look at some brutalist examples, because at the end of this, I'm going to give you like where I go to get design inspiration, and we're going to share like some, like we can actually like go through the sites and see like what's trending on awards today and talk about whether it's actually good design. We can look at Dribbble and Footer site, and we'll look at some of the design inspiration, and maybe we can show you like what brutalist is. So
there's a question here, Amar, you might want to address. It's like around gender preferences, layouts, but I guess maybe like the broader question is, at what point are you thinking about the user and like maybe the brand and the color and the feeling of that user? Is that coming on early in your process? Are you incorporating that? Or are you doing that a little bit later? Maybe like talk to like the user preferences that you're going to be going after.
Yeah, this is the part of again, if I go back to my cycle here, right? If I go back to my loop, this is the define part, right? So this is why a lot of people have designs that look like they could just be for anybody or anything, because you have not defined who that design is for.
Yeah.
Right? What is your market? Who are you going after? Who's the intended audience for the graphic? And that may be a primarily female audience. That may be a primarily male audience. That may be a generally older audience. It may be a younger audience. It may be millennials. It may be Gen Z. It may be, from the boomers. It may be, I don't know. It could be folks that are interested in pets versus people who are interested in sports, or people who are interested in, again, a corporate executive might want a different page than a young hip startup founder, right? And so this is, again, why it's so important to start with designing or with defining, what is this problem? Who am I solving it for? What do I need to do in this ideation / prototyping phase / like, what is the product that I need to put in front of them that gets them to my goal, right? And that doesn't often mean having a splashy design. You could go test that workflow in so many easy steps. That could be a simple form. That could be a email to trigger some kind of workflow that lets you start a sequence, right? Like, this doesn't always have to be like, let me design the finished product. It means let me define and design a solution that I can then scale out or scale around or build other things into. And it's finding that initial piece that unlocks your product market fit, right? It is testing and validating and experimenting with those early ideations that can get you, to a win very early, but only if you define that properly. If that's broadly defined, if you're like, oh, it's for everybody. Well, it's not for everybody. I promise you it's not, especially early on.
And this is where I've been working with designers in the past, where I found it helpful when they have a mood board, where like they just have like different images and other, like, just inspiration, and it could be like objects, just like a general feel of what the app is and what's targeted. And I think earlier on in my career, I greatly underappreciated that. But I think it is so important. To your point, like, someone's making they're getting an impression very, very fast, and that's oftentimes not communicated in the text. It's like in the overall feel and the color and how everything is structured. I remember seeing a video a couple months back where it's a designer, and she had 4 different product layouts, or samples, and she said, like, pick really, really fast, pick the one that is targeted at folks that are health conscious and want to buy organic products. And then you'd pick one, and you say that's the one. And then she would zoom in, and she would show you that they all had the exact same text. They were saying the same thing, but like immediately you already knew, before you even read the text, the one that was targeted at health conscious people. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so true. Like, I didn't even look at the text. I knew immediately that was the one that I would have picked up at the store if I was looking for like a snack or something.
Yeah. And I think organizing that stuff, again, goes back into the define and ideate phase, where you want to understand what type of, not just user persona, but what does this user like? What kind of images? Do I need modern images? Do I need classical images? Do I want big splashy images? Do I want the text to lead? Does this need to read scientific? Does it need to read trustworthy? Does it need to read cool? Does it need to read, like you're saying, Manny, health conscious or organic, or, like some type of specific diet or whatever it is? But that is the constraint, right? Design, if we go back, let's skip forward, because now we're going to jump into the next phase of this. This design is almost always deciding what not to build. Like, good design, art, real art, is knowing when to stop, right? Design, to be effective in the real world, is almost always about removing things and working inside of constraints, right? So my background is in product design and industrial design, and I was going to school to be a car designer. And people think car design is just all about drawing these beautiful shapes, and then you fit the motor into it, and you fit the wheels into it, and you fit the chassis and all this stuff, and then you have a beautiful car. But it's completely opposite from how that works. When you design a car, the designer gets the package, right? And the package is the chassis, the wheels, the motor, the thing, the guts. And then your job is to make that look good, right? To make people want that. And so oftentimes when we're building digital products, it's the same concept. You might have the engine in mind, right? You may have the dependency, the API, the MCP, the thing you want to work with. That is your guts, right? Your job is to turn that into a wireframe that you can put a skin on, a shell on, to turn those concepts, those data sources, this experience into something unique for the user. This is where you're going to make your living if you are a modern inventor in the agentic engineering space, right? You're not going to have lots of success trying to compete against the biggest SaaS companies in the world right now as a small builder or as a small business. What you're going to want to do is figure out, how can I, and we talk about this all the time, strip out all the other stuff that people don't want and take this one thing this core user flow, this experience of getting people into my application, and really refine that within the constraints that I have. And those constraints may be your agent budget. They may be the type of audience you can reach. Like you may have constraints that are the type of privacy you have access to, the type of data you have access to, the types of things you might be able to do. And so like working inside of those constraints and finding ways to succeed is what successful design is about, right? Anybody can go, and we're going to show you this. We're going to go to like Dribble, and you'll see like there's stuff that looks good, but it actually would never work on the web. It is just something that looks visually nice. And so good design is not about throwing everything at the page and trying to have like the most beautiful thing to look at. It's about solving the problem and getting to your desired result. And if you think about a meal, right? If you're a chef, if you're a cook, and you just throw all the ingredients you have at home into the meal, the final meal is going to taste crazy, right? You're going to look at that meal and be like, oh my God, what's in here? Whereas if you go and you like go to a nice restaurant, what they do is they make a meal with 2 or 3 core ingredients, right? And you taste the mint, you taste the lime or the lemon or the garlic or whatever the thing is. And that is what accents the project, right? This is your call to action. This is the thing. And so design, art, craft, taste, right? Taste, the word taste, we talk about what is taste? Well, think about what does it define, right? And so if you think about that in the context of design, like a lot of times we ruin taste because we try to throw too much at the AI, at the design, at the project, whatever it is. And so your job is to strip that stuff away. That is what a good designer does. And we talked about, this cognitive load that you lay on. And the reason you want to strip that stuff away is because, again, if you've done a good job of creating that and defining your goal, ideating through this process and bringing people through your design thinking loop, right? Then you have removed all of the cognitive load, right? The next natural progression should be for them to take action if they're actually interested. And this is where, again, good design makes the difference, because people arrive with like an idea of what things should do, how they should work, where they should be. And the more they have to think about accessing those things, the less they're going to think about doing what you want them to do. Now, that may be what you want. Like you might want them to stumble through, right? Let's say it's a site that's all about a game, right? Games are built to purposefully build like things to compete for your attention, to draw you over here, to like add to the cognitive load, right? So if you're designing a game, if you're building an experience like that, if you're, doing something that like even a news site, right? Like a news site is kind of designed to increase your cognitive load because they want you clicking around. They want you moving from place to place. They want you to maybe click on an ad. They want you to like bounce and dance. And so good design in that realm might be to add interference, right? If your goal is to drive somebody to a very targeted action, your job is then as a designer is to remove the interference, right? And so this is just something you need to think about. It's not that there's good or bad or right or wrong in a lot of these instances, but it does make it does matter based on your expected outcome, right? So Hicks law, I'm going to a couple more laws here. The time it takes to make decision grows with the number of complexity and options represented. So again, at the top, we have something that might be like for a news website, or for a very informational heavy site, or a docs, like you might see on the docs, a left sidebar with like a lot of content. Well, that's because you want to give the user access to all of these things, right? If you think about Replit, it's a fairly dense user experience. There's lots of stuff to go, like the cognitive load inside of Replit can get heavy, right? But that's because you have all these tools. Think about, again, Figma or Adobe Photoshop or After Effects, or like all of these, tools, like they kind of, you get used to where these things are. But if it's the first time, like if you look at the sales pages for all those products, if you look at the marketing pages, if you look at the conversion pages, they almost all bring you into this like very clear hierarchy, very simple options to get started. Once I got you in, once I got you interested, once you're playing with my toys, then it's a different story, right? And so again, this may matter. Where are you in the product user cycle? Miller's law, working memory holds on to about 7 items, plus or minus 2, let's say. So the minute you introduce like bulk items in a navigation, in a window, in a features or benefits section, whatever it is, I'm going to start skipping stuff, right? I'm going to start skimming even more so than I might already be. And actually, let me skip one more here. Yeah, this. So this is why like putting things first and last in that kind of sequence makes a big difference, right? This is why, again, especially the more options you have, the more I'm going to blur which option I should be considering, right? And And so for nav, for onboarding experiences, for the things that you want, that first and last experience makes a big difference, because the thing that stands out is going to be the thing that I remember, right? If you're walking down a street and everyone's dressed the same way, and somebody in between them is wearing, some outlandish outfit, that person's going to stand out to you in some way. Like, that person has made a decision to stand out from the crowd in one way or another. Again, not good or bad, but it's probably going to leave an imprint. You can do the same thing with your design, right? The one thing that breaks the pattern is the one thing that's remembered. But if you break the pattern too often, or again, if you throw too much stuff at your designs, people will be left with this high cognitive load thinking, what should I do here? What should I take away from this? What is the real action that you want me to take? And again, that can make me nervous as an end user. That could like reduce your conversion rates. And so there's a whole art of like conversion rate optimization that fits inside of this, that again, like kind of all plays and leads to, how do I again drive the user to an expected outcome by letting the elements on the page actually talk, even down to like my button design, right? Where do I want someone to click? Obviously, I could make something a link. I could make it default Wikipedia style. I could make it a button, or I could give it a little bit more embellishment and just show like, hey, I don't need to tell anybody to press this. I don't need anybody to understand this. It's just a button that does its thing, right? And so as you think about why things are like, why when you go to a website is the navigation almost always in the top right? Why is the logo almost always in the top left? Why is the search easily accessible in the header bar? Well, it's because I don't want to have to make people think about that stuff. If I'm going to experiment with my design, I will experiment in other places, right? Because I kind of want people to navigate and explore the site and have that familiarity that they have with these other digital products in a lot of ways as they experiment with what I'm building, because I might want to put their cognitive load into a different piece of the application. Now, if I'm creating some story-driven adventure and I'm creating like an online zine and I want to just like disappear the nav and do different things, that's a whole different ball of wax, right? Like that may be your intended design outcome, is to like not have a traditional navigation or menu or search bar or whatever, but that should be a decision you make based on, again, your iteration cycle. So I think I reversed a bit of the order here, but I'm going to jump back that this is kind of like a movie, right? If you think about your design experience, if you think about the storytelling, the hero's journey, right? Not every element of your site, not every element of your design has to be like the moment that carries everything. What you want to do is in that initial moment, create some kind of peak experience, some kind of emotional connection, some kind of like, ooh, what is this? I had this problem in my head. I see you have a proposed solution. It seems to make sense. Let me follow through. You have piqued my interest, right? You have made the first step of the sale. You have gotten me to take the next, like whatever step is, whether that's a click, an email, whatever it is, you created some kind of peak. And then there is this end experience where, do you deliver the goods? Do I get what you promised me? Does the experience drive me or take me to the place you told me you were going to take me? And those two things are essentially what anyone is going to think about when it comes down to, is this a good product or not, right? You make a promise, you pique my interest. I give you something, you then give me a thing, right? That's this little cycle you're looking at here. At the end of that cycle, if you have given me what you promised, we're probably in good shape and your product was designed well, right? If I got the value, then you win. And this is what you can then compound. And this is what you can take back to your early loop and start iterating and testing and playing with, right? And so this is the dot that you kind of want. Imagine this little, maybe I should revise this slide where the next one goes back into this little, the end, basically coming back into the top of our little define stage, because the end might be the end of one cycle, but now where do they enter, right? So like maybe that initial conversion was, okay, the peak was, I gave you an email, you sent me the email has an offer for the next step. Okay, now I might have a whole different design loop of how do I get you from that step back into the give me the money phase. Or maybe the first step was, I gave you a little bit of money and I want to make sure that the product makes me happy. So the next step you need to design is, how do I make sure that this person is actually satisfied after they gave me the money, after they make the purchase, after they do the thing? Because that's when the sale really starts, is when the person has converted. Before then, they don't care, right? Like nobody ever writes a bad review because they went to your website and then they left and didn't buy, right? Like that's never going to do that. You're never going to get too much trouble from people who don't actually like hit this peak and then take that first conversion. It's when you get someone to convert and they feel like you tricked them. They feel like you don't actually give them the goods. They feel like the experience was promised something else and then you didn't live up to those expectations. That's where you start creating like a negative spiral for your product, right? And so your goal is to stay on the top end of that experience as you define these visual products. And design is a piece of that, right? Beautiful design is perceived as more usable, whether it is or not, right? If you go to a lot of developer focused stuff, they don't usually care too much about design. Like a lot of times developers are working on the back end, they're working on the machine, the motor, right? You talk to engineers, they do take a lot of pride in their craft. I don't want to say anything about engineers. But design and like polish, the front end polish is not often where they're thinking about design. For an engineer, the design for them is like, how fast will this form be submitted? Well, what happens if the form errors and is the user going to be notified about that? Like that is design too. Is there an empty state for this form so that when someone gets here and there's no data in the system, like what happens and how do you manage that user's aesthetic? If I just give you a blank screen, well, you've got nothing. But if I give you an empty state indicator and it says, here's the next step, well, now I have to design part of the experience so that once you give me the email, once you log into my app, I'm taking you into this next user cycle, which is defined by the empty state. Right. And so good design, high quality design, thinking about this stuff buys you patience with the user and it builds a level of, again, we talked about trust. Like which of the forms, if you're being honest with yourself, if you stumbled into on the internet that you're looking at right now, would you fill out? Maybe neither of them, right? Because it's just a simple form. But I'm probably, based on other design elements and what the page is making, I don't know. I'm feeling better about this same thing on the right. And it's just a gut feeling. Right? Like literally before I even read it, it's just the thing I'm thinking about.
And Reimer, sometimes the engineer doesn't appreciate the folks that you're speaking to, like a designer. The example that comes to mind here is around the launch of the Prius. This was Toyota's first hybrid car. And the story is that as they were thinking about rolling it out, the engineers came in and said, hey, why don't we just take the Camry and then add the hybrid functionality and then just label it as like Prius and then you're done. But the designers came and said, like, absolutely not. The folks that we're selling to want to make sure that everybody knows that they are eco-friendly and that they care about the environment. We cannot have this look like every other car that we've shipped. It has to be new. It has to stand out so that when you see it 2 blocks away, you know, hey, that guy cares about the environment. And so they had this big back and forth because the engineer's like, hey, it's so much more efficient. Just like we already have the camera, just roll it out. But the engineer's like, no, that's not who we're targeting here.
Yeah, I posted a meme about this the other day. It's like if you kill a cockroach, nobody cares. If you kill a butterfly or a moth, like people are like, oh my God. It's like even nature has like aesthetic morals, right? So regardless of what you think you like, it is just naturally baked into our psychology. Aesthetics matter, right? Like you don't want to prejudge lots of things. I learned this like selling cars or like going into different, like somebody come looking scrubby to the car dealership and you would just write them off because like, oh, they don't have any money or whatever. And then they got all the money in the world. And then the next guy comes and he's all dressed up and he's got nothing. So like a lot of times we prejudge things, but oftentimes we prejudge things because those heuristics provide some kind of psychological advantage or biological advantage in the world. And so we make assumptions, we, like stereotype things, and design helps us, especially as it relates to the digital space. Like it helps us build trust. It helps us build emotional connection. It helps us really think about like, is this a thing I want to interact with? And like Manny said, that can come for lots of different reasons. It could just be, again, think about like most of the luxury brands, right? It's the same type of thing you're talking. It's a status thing, right? Like I may not want to go to a website or send anybody to a website that looks like this because it's like, I wouldn't be associated with the thing that looks like that, right? I want it to be nice. Or maybe I want it to, again, represent a certain political belief or spiritual belief or sports industry or whatever it is, right? And so the design, the aesthetic is the language you speak to do that without describing. I cut my teeth in media one time going to this political event and I was interviewing these folks and this guy came to me and he's like, I'm a Republican comedian. I was like, well, are you funny? And he goes, well, I do, I'm like, well, are you funny? Because like, I never heard of a liberal comedian say I'm a liberal comedian. I just heard like comedians, if you're funny, you just say I'm a comedian, right? And so like the only time you would add something like that is if you're trying to like signal to the audience that you're that thing. In design, you would never put that like adjective at front. Like you would just show me, right? So the design part of it is showing. If you have to tell me, like if you have to explain the things on the page, your design is not doing the work. Okay, color theory. This is pretty basic. You've seen this deck is essentially designed through this, right? So like the stuff that I'm trying to get, you to pay attention to, or the stuff I really want to call out, gets a little accent. Everything else is kind of sitting in this secondary shade, but almost everything, 60, I would even say 70% of it is mostly just not competing for your attention. It's there, it's interesting, whatever. We make call outs with boom, boom, accent, accent, right? And so again, simple colors, basic ideas, spacing out through your site, right? Proportions, white space. This idea of like the golden ratio is not like there's no perfect golden ratio rule, you know? But what it does is it allows you to kind of see and again break things up in a hierarchical way, right? And so like you can see it in real practice, right? So let's go back. Grids, rules of thirds, systems, the golden ratio, like there's lots of different grids. We could literally do a whole hour on just like grids and how to like think about grids. You don't need to think too much about that. It is something you could ask the agent for, especially as you're going to do like, different broken down designs. You might want to like set up some kind of grid ahead of time. But what you're doing when you're thinking about a grid or a golden ratio or anything like this, you're really just thinking about the proportions, the spacing. How do I take all these interesting things that we've just learned up until this point and actually apply them to a physical, unique page that like stacks them on top of each other, right? And so what you're seeing at the top here is a little wireframe, the orange dot being like our focus attention. You could imagine that being an image or something like that with a little subtle text. We've all seen this design over and over, and you can see how it fits into a grid. So let's take that deeper into like a full page layout where you might have a main piece of content on the left and another sidebar on the right. Even the sidebar has a breakup where there's like 3 sub pieces of content. Again, I'm visually giving you a hierarchy. I'm taking you into that, 70, 60%, taking you into like a smaller. And so the eye is always going to kind of float around the page in this instance. And then here's like a real design example. Again, I just grabbed this from Dribbble, sorts at the bottom. So shout out to the folks at Dribbble for providing this. But again,
in
you see,
photography, I think this concept is referred to as composition. And it's like always like one of the main things they say, like, you got to get your composition right, like where the eye goes, where you put things like into thirds, stuff like that. So this kind of reminds me of that.
yeah, and this image takes into account a lot of what we talked about before. So let me escape here and let me go to, like, if we go to these Gestalt principles, we have almost everything in place here, right? So we have proximity. If we look at that design, we have, like the cards are kind of organized. So here I have these things. I have these buttons down here. So I see all my social cards are kind of organized together. If I look at the continuity here, right? So like I don't have an actual line in this design, but if we look at the flow, right? If we look at the hierarchy, I do have a big headline. My eye does get drawn over and around and then through into these things, right? And so again, we're naturally going to go top, left to right, top to bottom. And so, and we'll go through a little bit more design inspo here as we get, because we've just got a handful of slides left. And we'll go into some of the design sites, but like, basic typography, again, we could do a whole episode on typography. I'm not going to dive into it too much, but give the stuff a little bit of room to breathe, And again, the agent's really good at this stuff, but this is something you can get nuanced with, right? Like you may have a special handful of fonts that you like the agent to use, or you might have some spacing that you like to adjust, especially when you ask for like, let's say a rich text element, or let's say you want to add a CMS where people are going to upload blogs or do different things. You might want to space or adjust that stuff in like some, interesting arrangement. And so again, like thinking about typography, thinking about the hierarchy, thinking about how all that goes into this type of thing so that the text is not competing with the images. Like you see, there's a lot of stuff on this page, but you could still get to and click through it fairly easily. Everything's kind of clearly organized. Like there's nothing on this page that's making you think about like, if I wanted to search, where would I go? Or, like the only cognitive load I have here is like, well, which of these images do I want to look at? And so this may not be the best design page ever, but again, it tied a lot of these concepts together that I was looking at that really just kind of feels nice. And this is the last kind of step. We talked about design is about removing stuff. So, just simplifying your text, simplifying your copy, simplifying your UI, everything is, like part of that design process. Again, it's like carving things out. What do you actually want the user to do? How do you want them to do that? And what's the road you're going to create digitally for them to take that on? So, I think that's it. Oh yeah, this is the last one I wanted to kind of cover, and then so I have these last two out of order. But let's go. Okay, dissecting the visual language of your design inspiration. This is something you should all get good at. Manny, you experimented with a taste app that kind of did some of this, but I want to walk you through the process of how I would do some of this. Wireframes, design inspiration, etc. So again, I used to do this in lots of different places, and maybe what we'll do is we'll get hands-on, and I can show like thinking through some design stuff at some point. Probably not today. I don't think we're going to get into designing anything today because I spent all my time on this presentation and not prepping any assets to actually like build on top of. But maybe in office hours tomorrow, we can like go behind the scenes on like how I approach design a little bit, and we'll approach the canvas and we'll just kind of like dig into a few of those things. So I'll have that stuff prepped for office hours tomorrow.
Chat, can you drop suggestions in the chat? What do you want to see Rymar do tomorrow in office hours? Give us some ideas.
Yeah. What should we design? What are you designing? Maybe if you're interested, come to office hours with like questions you have about design, and who knows, maybe I'll see if I can pull someone in, or I'll play Design Daddy for everybody.
Design Daddy session with Rymar. Let's go.
Okay. Change the name right now. Breaking news. Okay, so step one, Manny, you talked about this. Go to Pinterest, go to Figma, go to TL Draw, go to the Replit agent, like whatever you like to do, just start collecting assets, right? If you've ever worked on a creative project, one of the hardest parts is to like explain what you want to somebody. The best way to do that is to do it visually, right? And so what I mean by that is go explore some of these sites that we shared here. And I'll share this next slide here. Don't worry, all the URLs are here, and we'll add them in the email that goes out, as well as we'll probably dump them in the YouTube description. So I go and I explore, right? So I'm just going to walk you through at a high level. These are kind of how I think about this, and this is how I think about dumping things into agents so I can get good output as well. So I just dump images, right? I can dump images, I can dump screenshots, I can, like give it assets, maybe ask it to define a style. I might do this in another LLM too. Like if I want to bring just a very specific like description of a style that I like, I might go take it to a ChatGPT or a Claude or something like that, dump it in, or I might give it to the agent. Depends on how much I'm trying to do or how specific I want to be with my opening prompt. So again, this is up to you. This depends on the type of project or what the output is. If I'm trying something small, I'm just going to go right into the agent. I'm going to have it do it. If I'm trying to organize a whole like a mood board, I might go do that somewhere else first. I might bring some elements of that in and then bring the core pieces I want, because if you give the agent too much context, you might confuse it again. So again, when you're getting to the phase where you actually want to implement design, you want to give it one or two useful directions, examples, not like 10, right? So in that early phase, when you're looking for inspiration and you're just kind of collecting resources, go crazy, go nuts, go on Pinterest, just grab everything. When it's time to define and pick, you probably want to pick one or two key things, and you don't just want to pick one or two screenshots. You want to pick one or two key screenshots that say like, I like the title here. I like the way this image is connected with this title. I like the way this page is laid out, because those are things you can quantify and define as like articulable, like instructions, right? And so that's what you're looking for in phase one. Phase two is to take that and define a new skill with this, or to ask the agent to create a skill or to create some kind of reference doc so that you can reuse the stuff that you learn inside of that. And as you build out with the site, it remembers those instructions that you defined in the first phase, right? You could work with the agent canvas to do this. You could do this inside of Figma, TL Draw. Agent canvas is getting really good to do this type of stuff. So again, I'm moving more and more inside of that. But if I want something that's pixel perfect, I might be in Figma. Or if I'm working with somebody who, wants something to be designed the way they said it, okay, they're going to send me a file and I'm going to work with that. And I'm going to try to bring that into this workflow and recreate what they have by taking it through, again, this kind of phase. And then on the 4, right, on the last step, I am now thinking about how to take these things, this design language, these design concepts, this inspiration to start fitting it into my ideation, right? So again, those 0, 2, and 3 step are part of my define phase of my design thinking, right? So that's where I'm in the process of scoping what I'm thinking about and preparing either my initial prompt or preparing my graphics or whatever it is that I'm going to give to the agent. And I'm also thinking, where does this fit into the user flow of my expected outcome, right? Not just how this looks, but where does this fit into how the user is going to use it? So that being said, we can jump into questions if we have things clipped from folks. I've got on screen here a bunch of websites we can go and explore, and we can do hot or not on whether designs are good or bad. Yeah, and just kind of go through the rest of the flow here. So, Manny, what are folks saying? Hopefully, I didn't lose folks. I think I went a little longer than design school in 30 minutes, but hopefully it was useful for everyone. And yeah, that's what I know about design.
Do you mind if I bring up the comments from Restream? So
yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Because I want to show you.
Yeah, let me drop the widget here.
Yeah, the widget. Oh, perfect. Yeah. So first of all, this man is cooking. Rymar is cooking on fire. Keep going. Super informative. People are loving this, man. Daddy Design is in the house, or you call it Design Daddy in the house. And I also seen a couple of questions around this. I think Nadia kind of summarized this nicely. I guess how much of this are you directing agent with? Like, and people are curious, like how much of these design principles do you think agent has already embedded, and how much do you have to kind of like proactively direct agent on? And then like maybe like what, like specifically what skills do you might want to maybe templatize, like make sure you're getting the right output? So some variation of like how much am I directing agent on some of this stuff?
Yeah, this really depends. Am I early on in the phase, or am I a little deeper in the phase? Am I designing a landing page versus like a working product? I kind of dig into the weeds on the design side, either deeper or less. When I first start tinkering with a product inside of Replit, my goal is less about the design and more about getting a stable, functional thing, right? And by that, I mean the 1 or 2 core features that I just want to work. And then once I get those things working, I will take a design pass, right? And so I kind of go through that. That's my design thinking loop with Replit, almost always, right? And what I mean by that is like I will get to that first working MVP or working prototype, and then I will kind of pare down and make sure things are where I want. Do I want the nav on the left or on the right? Or like where did the agent kind of put the things that I asked it for? Because sometimes even if I drop in a wireframe, so like if I'm starting from scratch, I will almost always at least give it like a block wireframe of like, hey, I want a hero section. I want this. I want whatever. But oftentimes I'll just let the agent decide. I'll take that initial output. I'll make sure I have the functionality I want. And then I'll spend some time tweaking the design and going in and doing some of this stuff, or explaining like, let's move this over here, or taking a screenshot, marking that up and feeding it back into the agent as that process. And I'm always looping like that. I never let the agent build for too long before I take a design like moment and pare, trim, cut, slice, make it fit, right? So that the only thing I'm left with as we go are the things I want. Because sometimes the agent will stack certain things, or it will make an assumption about something you might want. Also, it kind of knows these design themes and core primitives and Tailwind and ShadCN, and like it has some of these design and style guides already baked in. So it's going to give you some best practices, UI, UX. Your job, just like on the technical side, is to know the difference between what's best practices versus like what looks good or what's right in that moment. And second of all, where to push the boundaries of what you might want from that design, right? So sometimes you might want best practices. Sometimes you might want to push that. I do very often ask the agent, like, what's best practices for adding a new feature, or, you know, where would it make sense to put something like this? So I do often ask the agent for those types of things. And sometimes I take the advice, sometimes I dismiss it. One of my favorite things to do is just ask the agent on the canvas for like 2 or 3 variations and use inspiration from that. So I think that's one of the things where maybe rather than asking for best practices, maybe asking for different ideations or different versions of a design is where you can then, you know, like get to a better feeling thing. And even with the agent, you can say, hey, I like piece of design A and piece of design B, can you merge those two into design C?
That makes sense. Super helpful. A couple of logistical items here. If you want to join our office hours tomorrow or into the future, head over to our community page. I just posted that on chat. I pinned it to the YouTube chat. So head over there, and then you'll be able to log into Discord and you'll get access to office hours. Yes, this will be recorded as all of our recordings. Just head over to YouTube, head to the live section, and go there. And then in terms of all the tools that Rymar is mentioning, like Drizzle and TLDR, we also mentioned Escaladraw. We'll have that in the follow-up email. And people want to know if they're going to be able to get access to the deck. I think Jevin in particular wants access to this. Maybe that's a premium perk. You got to join the Discord for that or something.
Maybe we'll drop the link in Discord.
Hey, there you go. So Jevin, we'll see you in Discord. You'll get access to that deck in Discord. It's kind of what we did when Andrew came on Blumson and talked to us about games. Like the games cheat sheet was available only in Discord. So
yeah,
you got to get in there, guys.
I'll probably attach it to the presentation in YouTube just to make it easy for folks. I'll drop it. I'll export it as a Google slide presentation or something like that, or publish I think I can actually just publish this presentation. So I'll just publish this direct and share the link. I can't believe, I saw comments about people cooking. I can't believe nobody's talked about my face being cooked. I spent all weekend in the sun, and I'm looking at my camera output here and realizing, like,
I think we're all assuming you're still getting used to the California weather, but you're from Florida.
I'm from Florida.
I know, but is it like this? Maybe the different exposure out there, or like you cut off guard, or what?
I spent all weekend doing like touristy stuff, Alcatraz, and like bus tours. My mom's in town, so we spent the weekend just like out doing sunny stuff.
Oh, Alcatraz, huh?
Yeah, we got locked up on Alcatraz. We did a bay tour. We lived our best San Francisco tourist life this weekend,
I saw the movie.
Welcome to the bay.
I get a sense of what's there. People want to know. I guess Nadia wants to know: can taste be taught? That's a hot topic. Ooh.
Yes. Some people have innately better design skills or taste than others. I tend to think that I'm a very artistic / creative person. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a good designer, right? So lots of artists are not good designers because lots of artists get kind of caught up in like this one idea and they fall in love with like this thing they build, versus design is more about exploring lots of ideas and kind of getting to that desired outcome. So art is like a lot more about how something looks. Design is more about how something works in the flow. And your ability to develop taste sits somewhere in between there. So yes, you can learn to go look at like what high quality websites are and kind of try to mimic that, just like you can learn to cook, right? Like you can learn to go to restaurants and taste what is good food versus like what's an overcooked steak, right? That's a very easy thing to taste. Am I chewing? Is it gristly? Is it like, there's all sorts of tendons and stuff inside of here? Well, maybe it's not the best steak, right? So you develop a taste for that type of thing. Design is the same way. The more you interact with design, the more you explore design, the more you tinker with design, the more you like dive into the world of design, the better you will, it's kind of like one of those osmosis things where you start you start absorbing these principles, and then you start reflecting that back in your work. So becoming a good designer is not something that happens overnight. Developing taste is not something that you're like going to go take a course and automatically have, but it is a skill you can start to refine and learn and get better at, for sure.
Yeah, I think like, following along with you and your workflow and your principles, like taking the framework that Rymar introduced and putting that into your builds. So like maybe instead of going right into build mode and have Replit build something for you, maybe you follow Rymar's approach of spending the upfront time putting together the wireframe or putting together a mood board or thinking about what the user persona that you're after, putting in those practices, and then being purposeful about the design, not just taking whatever agent gives you and building that muscle that way.
Yeah, and I think I want to be really clear that like you don't have to do a lot of this like extraneous design research work anymore, right? A lot of old school design thinking folks get marred up in like in like this empathize phase and, like getting real touchy feely with the user. That's okay, right? I think you should do some of that. And there are people, again, that do some of that innately better than others. What you really have to do, and this is the same thing we talk about when it comes to creating prompts for the agent, is you just have to really think about the outcome that you want, right? And then learn how to translate what you expect the agent to do for you into a language that allows you to get from where the idea is in your head to something the agent can actually output, right? And so with the design stuff, sometimes that might mean going to get lots of inspiration. Sometimes that might mean finding 1 or 2 pieces of inspiration. Sometimes that might mean writing a full design spec ahead of time and training an agent skill to like use a brand guide. Sometimes that might mean just defining a couple handful of colors and giving it some real specific prompts. And so I don't think you have to get too caught up in like, oh, I need to become a professional designer, or I need to, like just like go pay thousands of dollars for some art class to learn how to refine my taste. What this means is you have to start thinking about, again, outcomes and how to translate your desire for that outcome to the agent. Sometimes that involves giving it visual cues. Sometimes that involves giving it language. Sometimes that involves giving it skills. Sometimes that means giving it access to other tools and connectors and things like we've talked about, like we talk about regularly as you build with this thing. And so your job as a designer is not, again, just the aesthetics. It's about taking all of those pieces and packaging them into something someone else wants to use. Like that is the hard part, right? So I don't know if that answers questions or whatever, but
yeah, that's helpful.
had the whole chat something about prompting is key. That's right.
Here's a good question from Oswin. I was thinking about this myself too, Raimar. So I guess the question I would have is like, at what point are you getting your initial designs in front of people and getting feedback from folks? And then like maybe like once you deploy and you start rolling it out to like a broader set of users, how is there like a systematic way to measure whether or not you're getting that intended outcome? Like I would imagine you want to track like where people are dropping off. So like if you have like a critical path with like 5 different steps you'd love people to hit, and like they're dropping off at step number 3 or 2 or whatever, like I guess any thoughts on like how you're measuring that to make sure like you're getting the intended outcome?
So this is a whole world of like conversion rate optimization and analytics, and now you're going into measuring the actual stuff that happens. Initially, everything I build inside of Replit is kind of for me or against something I designed, or we have some kind of KPI, some kind of metric, some kind of expected outcome that we want, right? That could be, again, an increase in conversions, an increase in sales, an increase in signups for ambassadors. It could be, number of people that claim their community profile page, whatever it is. Like I'm using some recent examples here. So that's how you measure the user experience. Typically, there are like analytics and tools where you can measure where do people drop off on this journey. And so maybe you're getting lots of emails on your landing page, but those are not turning into like actual logins on your app. Well, there's something in that process between them giving you an email to you actually having them create an account where they're dropping off. That's where you would measure the user UX, right? So UI and UX are 2 totally different things. Let me maybe explain that for just a second. UI is the thing people touch. That's the user interface. UX is the experience. That's what the user does, right? That's what the user kind of experiences on the site. And so when you're talking about the UI is something you design visually. The user experience is something you design functionally, right? And so when you're talking about how do I measure the UX of a product, you have to now measure not just like what does a person do or where do they look at on the page, but what actions do they take and do they work through the sequence? And that's why I talked about your design not being a single loop. It's really about a loop that takes them to the next loop, that takes them to the next loop, because you want to design, again, landing page, got the email. Okay, that's one design loop. Email to create the account. That's another design loop. That may be a sequence of emails. That may be an onboarding flow. That may be like a login page, right? And so measuring how far they get in your progress. Did you get to revenue from that step? All right, so maybe email. Okay, now they're logging in, but now there's a huge drop between there and revenue. Oh shit, now we have to start designing the process from create an account to put their credit card in, right? And so those become your design loops, those become your iterations, those become the things, the buckets that you want to break down your content into, so that you can, again, iterate on this stuff in small scale, measure where you're actually going, and then have meaningful outputs based on like all that data you collect.
Yeah, and in the past, we've also talked about chatting with folks like PostHog. Like we have a connector with PostHog, and they're really big into this around mapping out different sequences in your app and then measuring that and measuring the user activity on the UX side, as Reimar mentioned. So maybe we should queue up some sort of collab stream with them, because I think that would be helpful too.
Yeah. I think there's probably, just like the sales, and this is why I kind of love to bring a little bit of, let's say, uniqueness to these streams, because like lots of people are teaching and learning in like the build side of things. But again, the design, the sales, the go-to-market, the polish, the refinement, like all of those things are the intangibles that really make this thing valuable. And so, just again, whatever we can do to bring in more resources from, like, in more, yeah, I'm with you. I think that super useful, and let's do more. Let's bring experts. Let's bring other folks in. Yeah, maybe in the office hours, we may or may not be working on some of that stuff. So, come on, get some.
Brett here, interesting question. Distinguishing between UI and UX when you're talking to agent.
I don't, again, it's like a lot of the technical thing where you might want to know what a database is or an API call or some of this other stuff. But again, you want the outcome, right? So you don't need to talk too much about like, hey, I want the user experience to feel like this. I want the UI to do this. If you're going to, okay, again, remember you have two buckets. UI is visual, UX is functional, right? And so a lot of times people throw those things together. And so you want to clarify that. So if I'm telling or instructing the agent, I want to change something about the visuals, I'm going to like use a screenshot, or I'm going to go into the canvas, or I'm going to start asking for iterations visually. And that's how I will communicate that I want to interact with the user interface, not the experience. If I'm working with the experience, I'm going to talk about outcomes. When the user comes to my site, I want them to be able to click on this button and do this, upload this file, and at the end have this, right? And so that would be the experience. So I would explain a user journey to the agent, right? And that's how I would then communicate UX to the agent. So visually, again, grab some visual references wherever I might do that in whatever design software or on the agent canvas. And then functionally, I'm going to explain outcomes in plain English. Again, specifically, how do I want the user to navigate through this thing?
Awesome. Speaking of people that are cooking, we got Tommy in the chat.
W's in the chat.
W's in the chat for Tommy. Tommy, I hope you're rested up. He just did like a 72-hour hackathon, virtual hackathon over the weekend. I was going in there every so often. He had this really, talk about UI and UX. He had this really cool app where participants in the hackathon had their own virtual room. So you could go into that room and chat with the participant. You could see their screen. You can talk to them about what they're building, and he would go in and interview them and talk. Really cool. So well done, Tommy. You got to give us an update and let us know how everything turned out.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. And drop a W in the chat just because you helped to boost the algo for us. Hey, W's in the chat. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. There's a question here. Sorry to be simplistic, but I'd like at least half a session about what you mean when you say get it out there. What I think you're referencing is just getting your software out into the world. And what I mean by that is sharing it with people that can help you test your assumptions. So if I go back to my presentation slide, let me see if I can do this. If I go back to my presentation slide and I go back to this one. Sorry, I lost the question. Let me present this. Do you have the question back up on screen, Manny?
Let me find it. But it was like, can you clarify what you mean in terms of getting in front of people?
Yeah, right. So this test phase, right? So we talk a lot about building being the easy part on these streams. And it's very easy to kind of get lost in a cubicle and you become the definer, the ideator, the prototyper, and the tester. And you stay in this loop. And next thing you know, you build this monstrosity of software that like you think you've tested, you think it works. It's got all these cool features. Let me explain it. And you go to the landing page and it's just, it does all the things. But you've never once gotten it out there. You've never actually once asked, hey, is this something you would use? Would you pay me for this? Right? Like, is this a thing you need? Does the world need this? Sure, I built it. Like it feels great because I built something and maybe I've never built anything before. So now I feel empowered as a builder. But like, are you actually moving towards the goal here that you've defined? And that goal should be some kind of tangible real world outcome. So when you're getting it out there, you're putting it into this loop in some meaningful way to get it in the hands of people that can give you the feedback you need to like work on the iteration cycle. So that could be at different phases. If you're in your ideation phases, let's say you're doing some logo exploration, maybe it's sharing a couple of ideas with friends or a couple of samples on the web and like having people vote for this. I see brands do this all the time. If it's getting it out there. Maybe it's a page you're starting a podcast, or you're starting an e-commerce store, or you want to build an email list. You're starting some kind of newsletter, right? So getting it out there might be putting the page in a place where people will give you their email, and then you can figure out like, well, am I actually getting people's emails? Right. And so that's what we mean about getting it out there. It's like taking the thing you're trying to build, the thing that you want to like put together, you're using Replit for, take that out into the world so that you can get, into this little cycle, so you can start actually figuring out, is what you're building right? And then how do you design from there to take it in the direction you want?
And yeah, Kurt, just to appreciate that the bias for you and for us and for every builder is going to want to be to spend as much time in Replit building things out and all the features out, and just pushing yourself like, hey, like you got to get this in front of folks, even if you feel if it's not ready yet. Like if there's the Y commenter saying that if you ship the perfect product, you waited too long to ship it, and I think that's just the general bias for all builders and entrepreneurs. This is something the lean startup guys kept just hammering on, right? It's like the customer is outside of the lab. It's not in the office. Like you got like as soon as possible, even if you don't have a fully built back then, like where it was like harder to build a prototype, like even before you have a fully built out prototype, just go out and start asking people about the problem that you're trying to solve, whether they would be interested in your product, like showing them wireframes. That like as simple as that, like getting out of the building and talking to folks is most important. But now it's so easy to build a prototype now. Like most folks just build it first. And most folks will they'll ship direct and start charging folks. I keep thinking back to the Content Challenge winners a couple months back. Great interview. Base, I think. So what they were doing is like they were on social media and they were just talking about problems and issues and challenges. And then enough people started commenting on a problem that they were talking about. They vibe coded a prototype and they shipped it in a weekend and they put it in front of their audience and started charging people immediately for that application. So they went from like socials right to app, like right away. And I remember asking them like, hey, like, did you think about doing a wait list or something like that? They're like, no, like actually, like you want to go straight to the app and want to start charging people because that's going to be the highest quality signal that you're going to get in terms of what actual paying customers want to see in your app. And that becomes your roadmap. Like that, like the folks that are paying you money, those are the folks that should have the highest say in terms of what you're building, even more so than you and your other team members.
Yeah. And I think that we talk about that being the thing to focus on because that is the real thing. The first phase of the internet, which we've seen up until this point, has basically been the free model, where if you're not paying, you're the product, which means we're exploiting data, we're selling advertising, we're, manipulating your attention. Like that's kind of the existing time-tested value of the internet business model, and people are moving further and further away from that with their attention mechanisms, right? So like they don't want that. What Manny is saying is basically like now the hurdle is like, will people pay you for this problem you're solving? So like building a thing is less exciting because maybe I could build the thing myself or somebody else is already building it. There's lots of competitors for building it. What your metric becomes for getting it out there is like, is there a hole in the market that people will pay you to solve that problem? And is there something worth defining inside of that scope that you can design into something that again opens that payment door, that vector for them to like send you money. And I think just like, in the early days of social media, people were like, how many likes can I get on my Facebook page? Or how many Twitter followers can I get? Like we know now that like that stuff is less relevant. In the product building world, it's going to be less relevant of how many emails do I have? How many users do I have? How many free people are on this thing? It's like, no. How many people are paying you? How are you like turning this into a real product? How are you solving real world problems? Those become like the benchmarks that I think matter.
Mm-hmm. And it's gotten crazy easy to do that, especially in Replit, right? Like not only do you build a prototype now, but monetization, you just add Stripe and you're good to go. You can start taking payments already.
Yeah. And I'm going to push back a little, Manny.
Do it.
Mostly on the language of calling this easy. And I think we are all going to look back and at some point, this may be easy, but it is not easy to get someone to give you money, right? In no world is it easy to go and open up Replit and build a product and like find your way to product market fit, right? There is a grind to be had inside of all of this, right? And so I think we do ourselves a disservice, and we got into this in the no code space like years ago as well, right? Like as I start using these tools and I'm like, oh my God, I'm building these automations and we make it, and we call it easy. And what I think we do as an industry or as folks who are doing this is we kind of discredit ourselves, or we make people think that it's like a little bit more approachable than it is. And while it is becoming more and more approachable to build digital products and to sell things and kind of like do this type of stuff, it's not easy per se, right? Like there's still so many things that you have to learn and get good at. And there's still like the idea of having subject matter expertise and learning how to speak a technical language. And as we saw today, thinking about like some design concepts. And so like for sure, for someone like us, Manny, who's been like beating our heads against like all the different pieces of this, it has become much easier to do and pull all these pieces together. But I still just kind of hesitate to like say any of this is actually easy because like it's a lot of work, right? There's a lot of things you got to think about and balance and kind of juggle.
That is a great point. I should clarify. I think the technical part and the building part, that's the straightforward part now in terms of getting a prototype going, adding monetization. That used to be tough, right? Like adding Stripe or payment wall to your application or even to your mobile app. That used to be tough to do. Now that you're one prompt away in agent. But to your point, Reimar, getting someone on your app hard, and then getting someone to fork over their credit card details, super hard. So that stuff is still super, super hard. I think that's totally fair to call out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think again, that is going to be the place where hard remains, right? Like that is going to be the difficult part. Like all of the other stuff, all of the technical, all the implementation stuff, all of the, design translation, the code translation, like, like that stuff's going to kind of, again, the technology is going to disappear. The business, the problem, the hard part is always the market. It's always the people, right? It's always building value. It's building the network. It's building the distribution. It's building the trust. Like those things are what matter. And good design should run through all of that, right? Like a well-designed process, business, brand, etc., takes all of those things into account at all of the touch points where people interact with the product, with the brand, with the digital surface of this thing that we're building, right? And so as you think about, I'm a designer, you're not just designing the product, you're designing the onboarding experience, you're designing the email sequence, you're designing the copy, you're designing the flow from payment to first delivery of the service. What do the follow-ups look like? What's the support mechanism look like, right? Like all of these things are part of your design process. And so if you just think like I'm building a product, well, yes, that is where you have to start if you want people to pay you, but you have to design the experience, right? You have to design the whole thing front to back. And that often starts with, a real vision, a real brand, a real idea, a real solution to something meaningful in the world.
Jevin had a question earlier. We may have touched on it a little bit, but folks that are struggling with spending too much tinkering around versus getting right and just releasing, like, aside from like, just tell them to get it out there, like any other like tips you have to offer?
Yeah, this often happens because you're just in like, you don't know what you're building, So I would go back to like defining what is it that you actually want people to do? Because if you just keep tinkering and trying to get everything right, like what do you mean right if there's no feedback? Is it just you using it? Then what's right? Like it'll always be right to you if you keep tinkering with it. It'll always feel right to like nudge this over here. Let me move. Oh, you know what? The bookshelf really would look better with the book over here instead of over here. But you never invited somebody to the house. So I would say think about what is it that you want someone to actually do and just get it out there and do that. Right? Don't like Manny said, if you're not a little embarrassed or if it doesn't kind of break once in a while, like you're probably not pushing the boundaries of getting it out there soon enough. I don't want to say you should be embarrassed, right? Like by a product, especially now because so going back to everyone can build now, the bar for what a good, quality product or thing is different. Oh, we had two Manny's. Oh, two Reimars last time. Now we got two Manny's. Okay. Okay. So what I was saying is that there's a bar to be set. Like since so many people can build now, the expectation for what good software is higher, right? And so this idea of just throw some slop out there and you can get away with being a little embarrassed, like sure, you can for sure test things early, but there is a little bit of expectation for like what a product should be, especially if you're going to lead with revenue or lead with that like high value conversion. So, you need to let things cook as long as they need to cook to kind of get it to that early point. This is why it's good having a network or places where you can get feedback that's low risk ahead of like kind of properly launching out into the world. But yeah, I think this is a very easy thing to fall into.
You know what you said earlier, Remer, I think really struck a chord with me. Like if you're unsure in terms of like what right looks like, you got to go back to who you're building for, what value are you delivering, what problem are you solving? And I think that is spot on. Like if you don't know whether or not you're heading in the right direction, maybe you don't have the right North Star in place just yet. So maybe that signal that you haven't spent enough time up front, as Reimar mentioned, building out that persona profile or doing that mood board or building out like those details of pain points where you're trying to solve for. So I think, yeah, that's fair. Like if, day to day as you're working, like, what I should be working on, like usually I have to go back to like, okay, what are my highest priority things for the month or the week? It's kind of that kind of thing. Like what is your overall North Star? Maybe that's like a signal that you don't have that quite refined just yet.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, like people will say like, oh, just like ask your users for feedback or get like lots of feedback, which can be like a challenge sometimes because a lot of times people just dismiss those requests for feedback or whatever unless something's going wrong. As soon as something's going wrong, I'm going to let you know about it in your product, right? Like that's when I'm going to go and we should do I have a whole presentation on like why people share, how people share, why things go viral, like on some of that stuff. And like negative emotion is the leading driver to why people share, why people will engage with your brand. And so oftentimes you will not get feedback when your product is going well, other than like conversions, right? People actually paying you. When you will get feedback is when things are going wrong, specifically after they've already paid you. Like that's when people get really loud. So what you want to do is you want to try to have mechanisms in your software, in your application that will let you track success without direct feedback. You don't always need someone to tell you this is what I want, and the users won't always know what they want, right? What did Henry Ford say? If we would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, and so like a lot of times the user won't always know. So if you ask them kind of broadly for feedback, you may not get the feedback you want, or you may get friendly feedback from somebody that is like inside your loop. What you want to do is like test. Hey, I sent 100 people to this page, and with this copy, 60% converted. With this copy, 30% converted. Okay, well, maybe we should go with the 60%, And so that is how you get user feedback a lot of times in a meaningful way. Or there are sites where you can even pay for unbiased user testing, where you can kind of define what you would like them to review about your product. You send them a link and instruction. They will record themselves kind of reviewing it. And so there's lots of ways to get feedback, whether that's from paying users, whether that's from unbiased users. If you can build an excited user base around your product, that is the holy grail, right? Because then that gives you the opportunity to build a real community of meaningful users that give you feedback. I mean, that's what you see us doing here, right? Is like tapping into this core group of like really active users inside of Replit. And then we take that feedback and guide it in lots of different ways inside of Discord, inside of whatever. Replit is obviously, like a way higher tier than what the type of software most of you are building. But it could be a microcosm of that. Again, so having really excited users, finding ways to get feedback from people, like that is all part of the design challenge, the product building challenge.
And getting other folks to look at your application, I think Ben Martin has a good suggestion here. Yeah, we have a whole Discord channel. I think we call it Showcase channel, but there's a channel there where you can post your application and your app and your idea, and folks will take a look. There's also somebody in our community that built out, was it Beta Bloom? Something that built out during the Replit 10 build-a-thon.
I think another one of the Tommies from,
Another Tommy. So he's got another service as well where you can tap that. I would just say that I think those are good, to get feedback from folks, but just remember they may not be necessarily your target audience. So at the end of the day, like you want to go to the folks that are ultimately going to be paying you for the service. That's what we're going to get the highest signal. Yeah. So I think sharing it, I think it's good to talk to folks and get some encouragement. But ultimately, you have to remember that that's not a substitute for your actual intended target audience and actually folks that are going to pay you for the app.
Yeah, and you really want to be careful who you get feedback from or who you let guide your product strategy. There is this concept, we talked about refining taste, and there is this concept of like too many cooks in the kitchen. And so if you have an idea and you let too many people kind of guide that are not paying or not the actual target intended use, like you could start building features, start doing all sorts of stuff. And next thing you know, you've got, again, a convoluted thing that like all your free users love, but now you're paying to host some service. Now you got to maintain all these things. Free users will still create support demands. So they will still be in your whatever support channels asking for help versus, focusing on those paying users, focusing on the ones that are going to move the needle for you and building the things that they actually give you in a meaningful way as feedback. So yeah, the who you listen to as feedback is as big a deal when you're building these products as anything else, any other decision you can make as part of this design process.
And it's a good call out from Chris. Yeah, if you jump in there, please don't spam. I guess, Reimer, what's like your advice? Like somebody like new to the Discord and they want to get feedback, they don't want to be too spammy. Like, what's your guidance in terms of like sharing it on Discord without coming across as spammy? I guess.
Earn trust first. It's like everything you do, right? Like if you walk into a brand new room full of people who know each other and you just start shoving business cards in people's faces, nobody's going to pay attention to you. You're going to be like the awkward dude that was just like, oh my God, did you see that guy? But if you walk in and you have a nice story, you introduce yourself. Hey, what's up? Hey, what are you working on? Okay, cool. This is nice. And then you're like, hey, you mind taking a look at my thing? Everyone's going to flood you with like lots of good feedback. So, this is just one of those soft skill things that, you can learn. People are pretty gracious about this. Again, we had, where is it? Tommy was just in here. Don't forget to come get your feedback from Beta Bloom. So we'll hit him another shout out.
Hey, Tommy.
There's lots of folks in the chat though that will kind of just help and like give you feedback. But the biggest thing is, again, with any of this, with selling a product, with designing a product, with getting feedback for your product, you always want to over deliver value before you ask, right? Like you always want to give, and then take, right? Give, take, give, take. If you follow that rule, whether it's in building community, whether it's sharing in Discord, socials, asking for feedback, whatever, like you will have a better rule of thumb. If you're take, give, like if you reverse that, people will start to notice that and kind of start ignoring that and then just kind of seeing and associating that with like, oh my God, okay. So
yeah, get in there, introduce yourself, maybe provide some feedback on other folks, maybe give a little bit before you ask.
Yeah, and this is another thing too. It's like just share it in one channel, right? So if you have community help, go into the community help channel. If you want to showcase something, put it in the showcase channel. Don't post it in general showcase community, because then you split people up and maybe one person responds here, another person responds there, and you don't aggregate all the attention in one place. This is also a general strategy for like, if you're going back to the how do you get it out there thing, a lot of people will try to be like, I want to be on YouTube and I want to be on TikTok and I want to be on Instagram and I want to be on X and I want to be on all these different channels. Same concept here. Pick one place. Pick one place and focus all the attention to that one place, because when you're small, when you're just getting started out, the more you dilute yourself, the more channels you add, the more surface area you add, the less attention you can focus on. And we looked at the design presentation saying like, hey, if you mess with my cognitive load, I'm going to be able to do less towards your directed outcome. And so, yeah, finding a specific channel that fits your audience. Maybe that's part of your design process. Like, hey, I'm going after designers, they're on X, or I'm going after, e-commerce, they're on TikTok because they have TikTok stores. Like whatever it is, again, pick a channel that fits that. And so if you're looking for feedback, find the right channel and focus it on a single channel rather than like spamming across lots of different channels. Okay. Yes, please do not spam and post more than once in every channel. You're training people not to care about your product you work so hard on. Yeah. You, again, going back to the taste, right? If the way you present or pitch your product doesn't have taste, I'm going to assume your product also doesn't have taste, right? So, there's taste that drips through all of these interactions.
Just posted the community URL again to sign up. I'll pin that. I got to pin that. But head over there to join our Discord there. The other thing that you showed earlier, Remember, I'd love your thoughts on, or just like a sentiment that the underappreciated thing for me has been like color and like how much how much emotion color conveys. I think that I really underappreciated that before working with designers. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. I think the clearest point for me that illustrates this is around logos. So like if you go and you Google logos by color, you'll see like there's a cluster of logos and companies that always use the same color. Like if it's a financial services company, it's always going to be blue because blue conveys trust and security. If it's an exciting type of young company, it's going to be yellow. If it's like more, like to energize you, it's going to be red. So like the color conveys a ton of emotion. I know people really appreciate that. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on color theory for sure. Yeah, there's a reason why alerts are red and, like call outs are, and vibe code people associate with like this purple. And, like lots of people are like, oh, I'm not doing purple because it's like screams vibe code or whatever, because there's like a trend of lots of purple sites. Again, I think these are rules to be understood and not always to be followed, right? And so just like the design stuff, sometimes you want to know, hey, these concepts are, the baseline, and here's how I'm going to deviate from them. Color theory can be the same way. You can use, like 4 or 5 colors and use them seamlessly beautifully. But it's an art, right? Like you can also make things look very cluttered and clunky and very amateur with lots of different colors, right? And so I think, again, this becomes one of those like understanding taste, having a clear style guide, right? So if you're going to use lots of different colors, you want to have some kind of, understanding of why and when you use what colors. Do you have certain colors for backgrounds? Do you have contrast ratios for text versus those background colors? Are your calls to action from a primary standpoint one specific color, and then your secondary calls to action are another color, and then you have a third call to action? And so those are places where, again, defining those types of things can make a lot of sense. This is where refining your design taste and looking for good inspiration can really help, especially if you're going to use lots of colors. It's very easy to have one accent color and a secondary color. It's when you start having 3, 4, 5 colors and you start mixing those together that they need to either be complementary or be on some kind of like opacity index from each other, or kind of play nicely in some kind of color wheel or color grid or something like that. And then you also have to think about like accessibility and contrast, and is this readable, and how does this translate to different screen sizes and stuff like that. So yeah, color again, we could do a whole episode on just color theory.
I think you have to do another episode on topography as well, because like when they get into topography, I know it's a big topic because designers that I've worked with will spend a lot of time, and even like companies will build out, like they will custom build their own fonts. It's that important.
Yeah.
And I guess as like someone that's new to the space, like I could like use like some like overarching guidance on that, like what types of topographies and families, and they always say like sans serifs, like what does that mean? Like why am I always supposed to be using sans serif? So that'd be like maybe another topic to add to the queue.
Yeah, and I think again, it's one of those things where like as more and more people get access to these tools, and these tools are going to get better, right? Like look at how good some of these tools are at building software, creating designs, like like organizing words, like doing all this stuff. What's going to set you apart in the space is your ability to add a little bit of character, a unique something that makes it yours, that makes it specific to the audience, like something that differentiates it from what's out there, because that is what's going to be the taste. That's what's going to be the the separation. That's going to be what like gives you an advantage in the market. And so the more you can learn about these design nuances, the more you're going to be able to differentiate yourself. Because what was the quote here? Know the rules like a professional so you can break them like an artist, right? So you want to know about all of this stuff. You don't always have to like have it in every prompt, but you kind of want to develop this gut feel, this instinct for how when you see this stuff that like, oh, something's wrong here, I need to adjust this, or like maybe this doesn't feel right because I see 4 different size fonts on the screen, and it's like, why is that? Oh, hey agent, can we normalize all this so that like all of our paragraphs use the same fonts across the entire application? And you can start getting a feel for that, and you watch how like your UI just calms down a little bit. And it's not as like sometimes I look at apps and I'm like it stresses me just looking, because you got 5 different fonts, a bunch of different colors, a handful of different things, and it's just like, whereas sometimes I see a design, I'm like, oh, this is calming, this feels good, this is like, I want to go in, like, so that's what you're trying to develop and evolve there. And again, the agent will do 70-80% of that for you. You're going to make your money with the 20%, right?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is you want design that's inviting, that's welcoming.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see. Google
what
page.
do you think, folks? Should we make this a recurring series here, like art school with Design Daddy Reimar?
Design Daddy. Oh my God! Don't clip that.
Because I think there's a bunch of stuff here that people want to know about. The other thing I'll add to your list is around accessibility. I think that's come up a couple of times, but like color blindness. Like I know, like I've been dinged before because I've always been like on the build and the spec side, and then like I get designers like, oh, this is not going to be good for colorblind people, or folks that can't read this, stuff like that. So I think that would be like another interesting topic to dive into as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's so
So
much,
much,
and
right?
there's so much accessibility. Like conversion rate optimization, typography, color theory. I mean, you can get down into the nitty gritty of like design systems. You could like, there's so much you could like dive into. And I think that's what we're trying to figure out for some of the office hour stuff, because this stuff's fun to do in this realm. And hopefully this is usable the first, 30, 40 minutes as like a nice chunk of someone to come through and learn. But there's part of like getting into like hands-on with this type of thing that would also be very good, because you learn from actually like putting it to practice. So we're going to experiment with some of that tomorrow in Discord. I think tomorrow we're going to get hands-on with this stuff, and hopefully like we can go through and we can like put some of these design principles into practice a bit. So yeah. Will there be tests? No tests. The test is, yes, the test in life is, do you get what you want? Like one of my favorite quotes is something like the only real test of intelligence is do you get what you want out of life? And so that is the test that we will ask you to put your Replit product up against, is like, does it succeed in the market, right? And that's the question we're going to start asking more and more, is like, can you build stuff that succeed in the market? So hopefully the tools and resources we give you and the time we spend on these streams are working towards that direction. Call it what it is, nerding out. Yeah, that's it. We nerd out on this stuff a lot. I've spent my whole career nerding out on this stuff. Manny, I'm sure you have also. And building things that people interact with at a scale that most people probably don't think about, right? Like when you have 10, 50, 100, like even when you get into 1,000 users, like it's all kind of manageable, because you can imagine what 1,000 people looks like, 100 of people, whatever, like dozens of people. Like you can in your mind, you can kind of imagine what that looks like. When you start dealing with products that like tens of thousands or like hundreds of thousands or millions of people interact with, it's very difficult to kind of comprehend that scale, because you can't like look out in front of you and be like, that's 1 million people, that's 50,000 people, and so the scale is very difficult. And then there are averages and trends and things that emerge from those numbers that is impossible to get when you're dealing with small numbers. If you have 10, 15 users, like one person in your sample size is going to be 10%, or, like 7% of your sample size. Like that's huge. Whereas if you have 50,000 users and you have, like one or two people, well, those are outliers, right? And so you may be designing, when you're dealing with small scale, with like only responding to outliers versus dealing with actual trends or what the pattern of the crowd wants inside of your defined audience. And so there's always this moment of thinking about like, what is also the scale and how does this fit into the scale? So again, there's so many things to think about as you nerd out on this stuff, and that you have to like just take into account as you want to be successful in this space. That hopefully, again, we are adding to that rather than stealing from that.
Oh man, I don't mind nerding out. I love this stuff. In part because for a long time, I felt like this world was closed off to me as a builder. My background is on the data science front, so I spent a lot of time building out analytical models and formulas, things like that. And then when I wanted to put that in front of users, I always needed a designer or front-end person to put in front of users. And there was always a big contrast. In one of our earlier deals, I was at a startup previously, and we built out these amazing models. We spent out months just like grinding, and like they would predict everything. They were great. And then when we wanted to show it, put it in front of the user, we had to put it in an Excel spreadsheet. And they looked at it, they were like, I don't get this. What is this? And I was like, oh man, like they don't understand. They don't appreciate like how cool this is going to be. And then until we got a designer on board to build out the UI, to build a schematic of their train or their machine and show where the alerts are and then show the flows and everything, that's when it came alive. And I was like, oh man, like I wish I had that skill. But that was like, you had to go like to a year to school for that, like whole front end stuff, like different technology, different methodologies, like different stacks there. Like it was always so like not accessible. And now I feel like with Replit, like I get to be the builder now. I get to do both ends of the thing, like not only like design the back end and the UI, and then like also get to build it out. So in part, I think this is why it's so exciting for folks like me that always felt like that was kind of not available. And now I get to play designer and like put some of these principles into practice and like think back like, oh man, I wish I would have been able to have done this like just like 2-3 years ago as I was building some of the stuff out.
All right. Well, it looks like we're frozen again. I don't know if you can
Oh
see or
man.
hear me.
You're frozen for me. I don't know if folks are catching you. All right, who do you see? Who do you see here on the screen, folks? Chat, let us know. Who's in, who's double, who's live. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you see Rymar? Double Rymar. Oh man, let's see here. If you can see or hear me, let me know in the chat. Yeah, we see and hear R. There are 2 R's again. Okay, can see Manny. Can you hear me? Okay, all right. Only you, no R. Okay. All right, so I think I'm good. And we're waiting on Rymar to come back. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll just wait on Rymar to come back. So yeah, I don't know how much of that you caught. Like, yeah, the like the ability to do the full stack. Because again, like I was in a startup space for a while, and we had like these different groups, and so we would be building out the data science models, and then we would hand everything over to the designers, and then they would hand everything over to the front end folks. And so it was this really long, drawn out process. And, it would be like the cycles would be too long. And also, like, I wanted to express certain things to the designer, like, oh, I think it should look like this. And I couldn't. I didn't either have the lexicon or the principles or like the concepts as Rymar was going through today. And I for sure did not have the ability to mock up the front end to show that. And why, like, I just get so excited about tools like Replit is that now I do. Like, I can do like everything from to building out that first prototype. And so that's why it's super exciting to me.
Yeah. And I think that's great. You can hear me here?
Yeah.
Okay. I had to swap computers and angles and everything.
That was fast. Wow.
So I think that's probably a lot of people that come from your background, and that's what we talked about. Like a lot of developers, a lot of engineers, like they're coming at this from one perspective where, like, again, the design tools are meeting them where they are, and they're being accelerated, right? Like that's half of what I think we're seeing in the market right now. The other half is coming from folks like me who I think are the opposite end of that. Where like I came from the design side, where like I always had these creative ideas for what I wanted to build, and I always saw these like websites. And for me, the biggest issue was like I was learning WordPress and I was learning Webflow, and the sites started looking very similar, And I had these ideas for like, I want it to be different. I want to put the data here. I want it to pull content from over here. And so I could like come up with these ideas, but I couldn't actually build the back end. And that's why I got excited about like the no code movement and started building all these automations and like all this other stuff. And so like when Replit came and this agentic engineering space opens up, this vibe coding space or whatever you want to call it, for me, it was exactly like what you're saying, but kind of from the other direction where it's like I had all these ideas and creative thoughts in my head that I wanted to like bring to life, but I could never figure out the back end logic. And the couple times I did, so like I have raised money before, I failed, I lost the money before, I like didn't build product, I didn't like get the product, like I never got my products out into the market. However, each one of those experiments kind of moved the needle in like the community building world. And so a lot of the products I built were around this space of building community. And so it's like I validated kind of the idea and the direction, but not the software. And I couldn't ever iterate on the software fast enough because it was so expensive to like keep up with the community, the speed, the market, the being out in the real world. And so we were always like months behind on the roadmap or weeks behind on this because like it's expensive, right? And so like what we're looking at here is this ability for like just to iterate quickly and for me to try and test and tinker. And I think that's why I found my space, because like when this tool came out, I was like, I don't care what it costs. I'm going to start building some of these ideas, and you start putting those ideas out there, and next thing you know, they gain traction. So it's very interesting to see that people are coming at this from two different sides. And I bet there's other sides out there. I bet there's other folks out there who are coming from another completely different angle. It'd be interesting to know your stories or your thoughts if you're out there on that process or, like your journey. So that might be a fun segment too, to do some of that. But yeah, it's just, there's such amazing tools that somebody with Manny's background can come and find, this kind of track. And then somebody with Rymar's background can come and find this kind of track. And you all out there can also, find your path. And this tool helps you, like just amplify your creative output, your journey. So I think we're just again, we're gonna beat the dead horse again. Like we need a meme of beating the dead horse. Like you're early. This is the skill you need to learn. Like just start getting to work.
Yeah, no. All paths lead to Rome. I think all paths are leading to Replit.
Bro.
Right? Because like you look at Nadia and Noni, like no technical background, ex-school teachers. You look at the base and the guys from the content challenge, like they're social media first. So they were like out there like posting on Instagram and TikTok first, and then they found themselves a Replit. And then you have your background, my background. It's like all paths are leading to Replit, and it's all merging into one.
I think it's so funny you say that. I have an article in my X article feed right now, and the title is "All Roads Lead to Replit."
Really? No way.
And it's like 80% done. That I'm like, yeah, probably going to publish in the next week or so. And it talks about how being ahead of the curve and how a lot of the stuff in the market. And it's exactly that. Like all roads lead to Replit. Like we're building the Rome of the agentic engineering space, and lots of roads are going to converge into all this. So.
We're in the same wavelength, bro. Push it, man. Publish it.
All right, friends. Well, hopefully that was a nice deep dive. We're gonna have to reach out to the Restream folks about this stuff, because it does seem to happen a couple times pretty regularly here, huh? What's going on?
It's always like also like in the
Right at the
third quarter, right? Like it's like a timing thing. Like I don't know if the server gets overwhelmed, but I'm glad we were able to power through it. And dude, you said like we weren't gonna go 2 hours. Like I don't know, this is a hot topic, dude. Like 20 minutes into it, people were like, "This guy is cooking. Let him cook." I'm like, "All right, add some overtime."
Well, my biggest reason I thought we weren't going to go too long is because I didn't have like prompts and stuff set up to go in design. But tomorrow we'll have some stuff. We'll tinker with this. We got a big launch announcement coming tomorrow on X Spaces, as well as on all the Replit official accounts. Friday we'll be doing a showcase, so we'll be kind of reviewing lots of stuff that happens between the launch and Friday. And switch to StreamYard. We're actually playing with some other streaming software. There's just this whole like level of complexity that we're deciding when do we add it versus not. And so, yeah, we know that we could solve some of this by like adding complexity on one side, but then it introduces other places where things could fail or become more difficult for us to manage. And so, yeah, we hear you, Uncle Fatty. We're working on some of that stuff. You're just watching us do it live, building in public all the way from top to bottom. So when are you building the virtual co-working space? Yeah, that's kind of some of the Discord stuff that we've been playing with. We're just going to have like more expanded office hours and stuff inside of there. So anyway, go check it out, replit.com/community. Go check out the Luma events calendar if you have updates about what's coming up. I think that's it. Do we have our little... I don't know if we have the closing scene out, do we?
Yeah, I can pull it up. All right. Well, join us tomorrow, everybody. Office hours is going to be great. Or launch party, or what do we call it? Like design hands-on. But yeah, it's going to be awesome. Join us there.
Yep. Launch party tomorrow. We're going to learn all about new things in Replit, and we'll see you Friday for the stream recap. So we can Replit. And what are you trying to say, Ramar? Just shut up and hang out.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All
See
right.
you tomorrow.
Bye, everyone. See ya.